All right, good morning, friends, and welcome to our second program on Monday Morning Musings. It is March 29th, 2021, and it is in Holy Week that we are speaking this morning in this wonderful time of the year. I am Alan Bevere. I am your host at Faith Seeking Understanding. I'm pastor, professor, and I occupy the self-designated Anselm Chair of Podcast Theology and Culture. I'm sitting in that chair right now, though you can't see it, but trust me, it's there. So anyway, as Anselm said, I do not understand to believe, but I believe and then seek to understand. So that's why it's the Anselm Chair of Podcast Theology and Culture. And so in our format today, which will be our format every week, we will begin with culture and end with theology, end with faith. Of course, the two are connected together. One simply cannot have one without the, or separate them neatly. They are integrated. So we will do that. And as I always say at the beginning of this podcast, or I always say, that means 2 times now, but as I will continue to say each week, I do express my opinion on views that are controversial. So if you really don't know if you really don't want to know what I think, it's okay not to listen. It's okay not to listen to the podcast or watch the video cast. I promise not to be offended, but what I hope you'll do is listen. I try to be respectful. Hope you'll listen. And if you want to respond, send me a message, send me a note, and I'm glad to respond to you. And if it's a good note, a good message, a nice message, and a thoughtful message, I may just read it at a future podcast and respond. Okay, so let's begin. So we got some stuff happening in Georgia. Georgia, the legislature there passed sweeping voting law changes. And depending on your views, these are either good changes or it's voter suppression. I've actually read the law, and I'm sure I'll have more to say on it in the future because it's not going away, and there's already lawsuits, and it's going to be tied up in court, and so there's going to be all kinds of things happening. So there'll be more to say on this, but let me just offer some preliminary thoughts, and that is, in my opinion, what Georgia did, what the legislature did, was they came up with a solution that attempted to address an invented problem. And the invented problem was voter fraud. And friends, we've got the best elections in the world. Our 50 states, even though the laws differ, and even though the Constitution puts the regulating of elections in the hands of each state, and they all do it differently, all states have wonderful safeguards in place to prevent against election fraud. Election fraud doesn't exist because you want to believe it. It doesn't exist because you make it up. The fact of the matter is, all of this talk about widespread election fraud in this last election is nothing more than gaslighting. In fact, I think when the historians write the history of these last 5-6 years, and hopefully not any longer than that, I think it will be entitled The Gaslighting of America, the successful gaslighting of America. Is there voter fraud? Yes, there is some that gets through. Most of the time it gets caught. And people who get caught get punished. But somebody ran the numbers, and I should have got the source for you this morning, and I forgot, and I didn't do that. But somebody ran the numbers and came up with the percentage of fraudulent votes that were cast in previous elections. I think it is combined, and came up with. And I want to say it's like 4 or 5 zeros, like 0.0000003% of votes were fraudulently cast. Now, anybody who knows me knows that I am not an expert in math. Numbers are not my thing. But I think it's safe to say that the word massive does not adequately describe that number. And so I'm suspicious of the law because, again, it's a solution in search of an invented problem. And I just think we need to be very careful about that. I believe in secure elections. I think I don't believe that we should just let anybody vote who says they can vote without doing checks and follow-ups and that kind of thing. But we do that, and we do that well. We do that very well, in fact. We do it in a bipartisan way in all 50 states with Democrats and Republicans participating together. So I want to say there's something foul afoot here, but I'll have more to say about that as time goes on. But that's what I'll say today. Beware of solutions to invented problems. There's something more going on. All right, so let's move from these shores to the Suez Canal, right? The barge that's been blocking the Suez Canal, and it's led to all kinds of wonderful humor on social media, and of course, social media is at its best when it comes to humor because there's a lot of funny people out there, right? And so, I think it's fascinating to me because one of the things that I've been reading is that because of this huge barge that is stuck, and these things are huge, and they carry a lot of stuff with them. Because of the barge has been stuck and is holding things up, that it's affecting 10% of the world economy. Now, you might think in some way 10% isn't much, but it sure is. I mean, think of 10% unemployment, right? That's a huge number. Think of a business losing, particularly a small business with a thin profit margin, losing 10% of its profits, its income. So 10% is a big number. So 10%, it's not going to crash the global economy, but it's hurting. It's hurting some folks. And it's just a reminder to me that we do live in a global world. Globalism is here. And for those who really want the good old days to return, when we could be focused on our own nation, sort of tuck in our own borders, be nationalists, not worry about the rest of the world, and just do our own thing. Folks, no pun intended here on the Suez Canal, but that ship has left port. Globalism is here to stay. Now, it presents its own challenges, to be sure, but it is here. And to somehow believe we can go back to some pristine time when it's just about us four and no more, it just is not true. It just is not a reality. I remember many years ago having several conversations with a woman who, an older woman, who said that the biggest problem with America is computers and the internet. And what we just need to do is get rid of it all and go back. Well, that's just not happening, right? And so we deal with, I sometimes think I should put a sign on my office door that just says it is what it is, because sometimes what we deal with are concerns that people have that are just the way they are. And so globalization is here to stay. And actually, I personally, even though it presents many challenges, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that it allows us to be closer together, and maybe by working together through trade and other means, that we get to know each other better, and maybe globalization, if we're willing to embrace it, might lead to less violence in the world, might lead to less war, and that would be a really good thing. All right, well, let's move on. Let's come back to our shores. Let's talk about let's talk about the President of the United States and executive orders and Congress. So of late, presidents have been issuing executive orders, I mean, executive orders have been around for a long time, and executive orders allow the president to do a limited number of things within his purview. And one of the things that has happened over the last 20 years in particular is presidents are issuing executive orders that are probably more questionable when it comes to the Constitution. This is not just one president that's done this. Bush has done it, Obama did it, Trump did it, now Biden's doing it. And I can remember during the Obama administration when the President Obama was issuing some executive orders, particularly executive orders around the Affordable Health Care Act, dealing with budget issues, which clearly is in the purview of Congress, that Jonathan Turley, who is a constitutional lawyer and who's liberal and who supported President Obama, came out and said that this was not right, that these executive orders were creating a constitutional crisis. His pleas went largely unheeded. Now, let's be real careful here, because what happens when you start talking about executive orders, people get into a certain kind of match on the issue of how many executive orders. So they said, well, Obama issued less executive orders than Bush, and et cetera, et cetera. And so people start arguing over the number. It isn't the number that Turley was concerned about. It was the nature of the executive orders, doing things that really are in the purview of Congress. And this is the important point. So why is this happening? Why are presidents from both parties issuing more executive orders? And Joe Biden is now doing it, and some of them are certainly questionable. Constitutionally, if you put it to constitutional muster, there would be certainly some executive orders that I think courts would rule out of bounds. But it's happening, and previous presidents are getting away with it. What's going on? Well, what's going on is, and this is no surprise, we've got a dysfunctional Congress. We've got a completely dysfunctional Congress that is just not doing its job and hasn't been doing its job for a long time. Now, why is that? Well, there's a couple reasons. First, and the umbrella overshadowing all of this is the fact that we are really divided as a country, and we are extremely divided. One of the things that has been a casualty of the last couple of decades in politics is the one thing that makes democracy work. One of the things that makes democracy work, and that's compromise. The willingness to be able to give up something of what you want in order to get something of what you want. And we're not doing that in Congress. And so a lot of it is because we the people, and I'm going to put this on the doorstep of we the people. And we love to blame the politicians. It's a lot of fun, and they certainly deserve blame. But we the people are responsible for this, because politicians just reflect us. We put people in office that just reflect us. John Adams said that politicians will only be as moral as the people who elect them. There you go, folks. Okay. The problem is that because of this extreme perspective, and I'm not talking about partisan. You can be partisan, but not extreme. You can be a committed Republican. You can be a committed Democrat. You can vote with the Democrats 95% of the time. You can vote with the Republicans 95% of the time, and be partisan, but that doesn't make you extreme. What makes you extreme is your absolute unwillingness to give any ground, even if nothing happens. Why is this going on? Well, of course, the umbrella, as I said, is the extremism, but it's a couple of things. First, in reference to the House in particular, it's the issue of gerrymandering. And gerrymandering is this idea of, in the Constitution, gives state legislatures the authority to draw congressional boundaries after a census. So what legislatures in states from both parties, by the way, both parties have been guilty of this over the years, what both parties have done is gerrymandered districts to their favor. So that's why if you open up, get into a state map, Google congressional districts in Ohio or Indiana, whatever state you live in, and take a look at the boundaries. And in the vast majority of states, you're going to scratch your head at some of the crazy boundaries. And why do they do that? They do it because they want to draw the boundaries in such a way to favor their election. Congressional districts, in general, it's not true completely across the board, but in general are much more homogeneous. I always have to pause when I say that word to get it right. They're much more, the voters are similar. They've got similar perspectives, a lot of times a similar demographic. That's important too. And it makes a difference for the vote. So what gerrymandering is the way to draw districts in a way to favor your party in elections, okay? So gerrymandering has continued to be a problem. And so what it is that you have representatives then, a lot of districts are safe districts, meaning they're safe for whatever party in the way that they're drawn. They're safe for Republicans, they're safe for Democrats. There are less and less swing districts, districts that are purple, if you will, not red and blue, districts that will vote for Republicans and Democrats. So because of this, if you're representatives who their number one concern is just getting reelected, that's what they want to do. They enjoy the perks of the office, and so they just want to be reelected. So if you are a Republican or a Democrat, your concern is not losing to somebody in the other party. Your concern is getting primaried. Your concern is that if you compromise a little bit, if you don't toe the orthodox line, the orthodox party line, then you worry that somebody to the right of you or to the left of you is going to primary you to defeat you. So this doesn't bode well for compromising in the House, right? Senate, much little broader because states, right? There's a more diverse constituency. You do have deeply red states, deeply blue states, but you got purple states. So, you know, it's much more of a diverse thing for senators. But the problem as I see it in the Senate is that some of the rules are just crazy. And I'll be the first to confess I don't understand the logic, and maybe there is a logic I don't get. But you know, the majority leader should not be able to block legislation from even coming to the floor or being discussed. Okay, Mitch McConnell, when he was majority leader, blocked, I don't know, 400 and some bills that the House sent to the Senate. By the way, he wasn't the only one. You know, Harry Reid, the retired Democratic senator from Nevada, when he was majority leader, pulled the same kind of stuff. And this is just the thwarting of democracy. Let the elected officials do what the Constitution has told them to do, have regular order. That means follow the Constitution, follow the rules, craft the legislation, debate it, amend it, vote on it up or down, one way or another, right? One way or another, pass it or reject it. Part of this problem is, by the way, is that what majority leaders do is they want to protect their own constituency, the politicians in their party, the senators in their party, from having to answer for an unpopular vote, right? So the best way to do is not to even bring it to the floor. So the whole executive order thing is developing because we just have a dysfunctional Congress who isn't doing their job. And we, the people, are not doing what we need to do in order to force them into having to do what we sent them there to do, that is govern. Okay. So, and by the way, we always blame everybody else's politicians. It's their politicians. We give a general blanket overview of condemnation for all politicians, but the reality is we keep electing our own. That's why we keep sending them back. We complain about it. We need term limits, blah, 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 but we keep electing the people because actually, functionally, we think it's the other side. we think it's everybody else who keeps sending their people back, but not ours. So this is going to continue, folks, unfortunately, and we're going to continue to see every president issue executive orders, and some of them probably will be constitutionally questionable. But Congress is just sleeping at the wheel, working on their campaign for the next election, and willing to do whatever it takes to get elected, and that is even put aside their principles if need be. Not all of them. There are those who want to do a good job, but unfortunately, the snake oil salesmen and women are the ones usually who are in charge there in Washington. So it's going to be tough. That's the way it is. Okay, enough of that. So I think we need to move now more into the theology, faith aspect here. It is Holy Week. One of the most important weeks, the most important week of the Christian year. It is Holy Week. That what happened 2,000 years ago between the triumphal entry and the resurrection of Jesus and everything in between, it is this week that makes the Christian faith. The Christian faith stands and falls on what happens and doesn't happen in this week. Of course, the Christian faith starts and is birthed by the resurrection of Jesus without resurrection, and I mean without bodily resurrection. I don't mean some spiritual understanding of resurrection, in which Jesus' spirit goes to be with God. I'm talking about bodily resurrection. Without that, there's no Christian faith. But one of the things we have to remember is that this week of the year, and by the way, this is my favorite week of the year, that we need all of Holy Week, not just part of it. I grew up in a tradition, a Protestant tradition, where we didn't really do Holy Week. We did Palm Sunday and we celebrated Easter, but we didn't do everything in between. And the reality is we cannot grasp the nature of Holy Week and what is happening and what our faith is about and the depth of the gospel, the depth of what it is that Jesus has done for us. If we just go from parade to party, we can't just go from parade to party and skip everything in between. We need Maundy, Thursday. We need the Last Supper, right? We need Good Friday. Easter Sunday comes into focus in all of its wonder when we have been to the cross. And so this is a week in which we journey with Jesus, and we journey everywhere he goes. We follow in behind him as he triumphantly enters into Jerusalem. We follow in behind him, and we sit with him at the table, this Last Supper, this last Passover meal that he celebrates, and that he will transform the meaning. And unlike the disciples who abandoned him on Calvary, we must walk there. We must follow him to the cross. We must be part of that story. And then we need the silence of Holy Saturday. We have to have that silence. The King is dead. The King is asleep in the earth, and the earth is quiet. We have to have that quiet. And then finally, that leads to the great shout of Easter, right? He is risen indeed. And now we understand the depth of God's love and what God has done for us and for the world. So on this Holy Week, my hope for you is that even if you've been in a tradition where you haven't done the stuff in the middle, right? You've just done parade and party. My hope is you'll find a place to take the whole journey with Jesus in this most sacred week of the year. And Easter, by the way, yes, Easter is a more significant holiday than Christmas. I know we go all out for Christmas because we've marketed it and we found a way to utilize it for profit. But if you have no Easter, there's no Christmas. If you have no risen Jesus, there's no Messiah to talk about and ask the questions about his birth, right? If Jesus dies and isn't raised, he's just one more failed Messiah. And first century, well, within 100 years, either side of Jesus, Israel had plenty of failed messiahs. If he has not been raised, Jesus is just another failed Messiah, maybe a little footnote in the history books. And there's really no reason to celebrate his birth if we can't celebrate his resurrection. So this is a holy week, folks, and I just hope that it will be a meaningful one for you and that it will deepen your faith as we all journey together with Jesus in this time. All right. Well, I think we are about at its ending. Thank you for tuning in, and may you have a blessed week. I'm Alan Bevere, and I am the Anselm Chair of Podcast Theology and Culture here at Faith Understanding University. And so as I signed off last week, using my terribly poor Walter Cronkite, I can't even say his name, Walter Cronkite, and Paul Harvey impressions. That's the way it is. Monday, March 29th, 2021. I'm Alan Bevere. Good day.